countering cargo theft, the growing use of in-cab video, and prioritizing supply chain resilience. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories, as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by Zebra Robotics Automation. How can you drive down your cost per unit and make every movement count? Read Zebra Robotics Automation's latest ebook, Unlocking Fulfillment Potential, to learn how their Zebra Symmetry fulfillment ecosystem was engineered to boost your profits. You'll discover a unique threefold strategy that enables workers to pick more items in less time with up to 30% fewer robots compared to legacy systems. Download it now at zebra.com/fulfillment. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, cargo theft continues to be a problem for transportation companies. Sophisticated, organized thieves target goods in transit, from high-valued electronics to even a recent shipment of eggs. How can shipping companies prevent and discourage theft of their goods? To find out, here's Victoria with today's guest. Victoria?
Thanks, Dave. Our guest today is Danny Ramon, Director of Intelligence and Response at supply chain risk management firm Overhaul. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you, Victoria.
It's great to have you here. So, cargo theft has always been a source of risk and disruption for supply chains, but it's getting more attention recently, it seems. How would you assess the situation as we are here in early 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been. And, if I had to put just a short phrase on the state of supply chain security in early 2025, it would be worse than it's ever been, and with a grim outlook, unfortunately.
So, Overhaul recently released a report on the topic. In light of what you just said, what were some of the highlights? What stood out to you? Why is this among the worst times?
Yeah, those reports are great, and what's awesome about those is taking them in context of past reports. But some of the things that stood out to me just taking this one in isolation is how pluralized the problem of cargo theft has become. It's such a big problem now that the large trends, like especially seasonal trends that we used to see, have really kind of flattened out because there's so many more people who have moved in, so many more new MOs that have filled the gaps that there used to be, that in order to find these trends, you have to dig deeper into specific MOs, specific regions, or specific products.
So what are you seeing in terms of regions, products, and modes of transportation? Where are the biggest risks?
Yeah, the biggest risks right now, people always like to speak geographically about risk, but when you're looking at it systemically, the risk doesn't necessarily come from where you are in the country, unless you're talking about a specific type of MO, like large-scale pilferage. By and large, the risk comes from what you're carrying and where you started your journey. And when we look at those factors, the perennial hotspots are still the hotspots because they have just the greatest amount of cargo flowing through them. So there's the most amount of targets to choose from. That would be Southern California. On the East Coast, we've got Atlanta and Savannah, Georgia, as well as Detroit, Chicago, Memphis, really the intermodal supply chain hubs as they are.
And what about types of products, whether it's trucks, rail, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a lot of increase over on rail theft because there's just not as much control over the freight when it's moving by rail. There's not as many eyes on the freight. There's not, and like I said, there's not as much direct control. But when we talk about products, the thieves that target these products are incredibly agile. And they can react to market trends at a moment's notice. And beyond that, they've been able to evolve their liquidation methods to the point where they're now going criminal direct to consumer through a lot of e-tail websites, which allows them a much broader target range, right? Because all of a sudden, a lot of things that maybe were too low value to be a profitable target for them before, when they had to move through a fence, are now becoming lucrative targets for them when they're, reaping 100% of the sales of that particular product.
Yeah. So I don't know. Can you give us an example of some things? Everyone I think heard the story about all the eggs that were stolen a
Yeah.
while ago.
I
What,
mean,
what would,
the eggs are a great example because that's very recent. But I mean, if we go back to the pandemic, I mean, truckloads of toilet paper and
Mm.
paper towels being stolen, when truckloads of televisions were being bypassed, just shows how much the margin that the thief is going to get actually affects their targets more than the raw value of what's inside that trailer or container. But we also see, perennial, uh, depending on prices of copper scrap, we'll see targeting of scrap metal loads. Depending on certain state subsidies for solar panels, which would drive those into demand, we'll see a targeting of solar panels. When oil price spikes, we'll see theft of motor oil. I mean, just anything that can be sold is going to be a target.
So, along with that, so thieves are always coming up with new tactics and strategies. When it comes to cargo theft, what are you seeing in this regard? How is it changing, maybe, as it
Yeah,
relates to
well,
recent years?
in I always tell people that in the pandemic, it wasn't just blue collar and white collar folks who recareered and started gaining in tradecraft, right? We saw that with criminals as well. So some of the biggest threats that we're seeing, and especially when it comes to evolution, is the evolution of large scale pilferage. Pilferage used to be small scale by definition, and now we're seeing entire 53-foot trailers being emptied manually in under 5 minutes because, the heat that comes from stealing the tractor trailer along with the cargo is going to be too intense for these guys, right?
Mm.
Uh, Beyond that, we talk about sophistication with strategic theft. That's probably the biggest threat right now in supply chain security because of how scalable it is, and how low risk it is for those who are performing it when they don't even come into contact with the stolen product.
What do you mean by that, by strategic theft?
Yeah, strategic theft, it's an industry term. If we break it out into more like law enforcement specific terms, it's theft by fraud or theft by deception. Now, there's dozens of different MOs that get mixed and matched and layered depending on what target they're pursuing. But it's essentially, it can be anything from identity theft to social engineering to fraudulent paperwork, to fraudulent carrier or broker identities. We've seen all sorts of stuff in this regard, and it's continuing to evolve.
So, how can companies protect themselves from all of this, and even, fight back against the threat?
Yeah. We always say that there's no silver bullet, that one thing that you can do, but if there were a place to start, and there absolutely is, visibility and control over your supply chain is key. If you don't know you have a problem, you can't possibly address it, right? So
Mhm.
having granular visibility, and the ability to do something about the risks that you uncover with that visibility are absolutely crucial.
You mean
So
visibility in terms, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but in terms of like the technology that you're
yeah,
using, that kind of thing?
absolutely. I mean, we at Overhaul we provide remote compliance monitoring, which is a great tool. We're introducing Fraud Watch and Vision GPT, which are going to be essentially two-factor authentication in terms of fighting fraud at the pickup site. A lot of folks have all sorts of ways to verify carriers. There's entire companies that are built up around that concept, but we're the only ones that have what I call two-factor authentication, where it's not just checking the information that you're provided, but it's also checking the personnel and equipment that show up at your origin site, at your pickup site, as well as the remote compliance monitoring to monitor it while it's in transit, to monitor for those signs and patterns of behavior that indicate fraud or theft.
So at the outset, we started by talking about how this, the situation may be worse than it's ever been. Do you think companies throughout the supply chain are aware of that? Are you doing a lot of education on this, or are people seeing that this is a really serious problem right now?
It's a little bit from all of those columns, right? I mean, we're definitely hearing from a lot of people who are experiencing cargo theft for the first time. Maybe they've heard of it before, maybe they haven't. And then we're hearing from people who are just starting to hear the stories coming out of the industry, even though, we've been blasting it for 2, 3 years at this point, how we're seeing continued record-breaking cargo theft quarter over quarter and year over year. So while a lot of people are gaining insight into the problem on their own, we are still finding that it is an uphill battle to make sure that everybody in the logistics industry is properly educated on the threat.
And just to wrap it up here, is there anything else about this that we haven't discussed? I'm sure so much, but anything you'd like to leave our listeners with, whether it's shippers, carriers, as you say, anyone across the logistics landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. The message I would put into everybody's head is, don't take my word for it. Just plug yourself into the industry and see that, everyone is experiencing the same thing. I highly recommend following us on LinkedIn, following myself on LinkedIn. I'm always posting whatever open social intelligence I can get my hands on. But beyond that, plug yourself into the industry events, the summits and the conferences that are going on throughout the year, because those are the places where you're really going to find out what's going on from the boots on the ground.
Terrific. Danny, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, Victoria. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. So we have been talking with Danny Ramon of Overhaul. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Danny and Victoria. Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Ben, you wrote a story about the various ways that trucking fleets are making use of in-cab video, and it can vary a good bit by state. Can you share more?
Yeah, I'm glad to. We've seen an increasing use of technology inside truck cabs in recent years. Thinking about things, of course, like the electronic logging devices, the ELDs that are mandated, but also GPS locators and no end of smartphone apps. But as we said, one of those technologies that's been rising in applications, but also a little more challenging to adapt to, has been dash cams. So many trucks, of course, have forward-facing dash cams that see the road ahead, just as you do as a driver. And part of the intent there is that if you're recording your traffic, it provides sort of an automatic record that you can use to defend against charges if there's an accident or some sort of altercation. But other trucks also have inward-facing video cameras or driver-facing. Those can be used in different ways, but the vendors who make those cameras say they help fleets train the drivers to be safer. And that happens because the digital video cams, when they're looking at the driver, they can detect risky behaviors. That one company listed those as included smoking, distracted driving, cell phone use, inattentiveness, eating and drinking, not wearing a seatbelt, all sorts of things. However, as you might imagine, listening to that list, some drivers object to so much oversight, since they see it as an invasion of privacy and they don't want to be filmed and recorded. So this week I saw something that caught my attention in that area. It's from a company in San Diego called Lytx, and they provide a GPS tracker in their truck along with their driver-facing camera. So this allows the truck to automatically shut off those driver-facing cameras as soon as the vehicle crosses into the state of Illinois, and then it switches it back on again when the truck crosses the state line.
So, Ben, Illinois, what's special about Illinois that makes it different from other states?
Right? That was what caught my eye for sure. And it turns out when you look into it, there's a real patchwork of laws in many different states for dash cams, both forward and inward pointing. Some of them require that you may not record things that happen on private property. So depending which way the truck is pointing, for example. But another example relevant to this story was in Illinois, there's a law called the Biometric Information Privacy Act. And that says that people are in control of their biometric measurements. That's how, if you've flown recently, you look at a camera and it does a measurement, I suppose, of the geometry of your eyes and nose and mouth. And that has gained a lot more relevance in recent years because of the increased use of machine vision and artificial intelligence technologies that are often part of those driver-facing video cameras. So what we have now is that an employer in Illinois cannot record the truck driver's biometrics using those AI tools without written consent. So this tool solves that problem by just switching off the camera in the state. And by the way, Lytx also has some other versions that offer increased privacy. Two examples are something called the Lytx Conceal service, which uses blurring technology to automatically obscure faces or license plates. And there's another product that they make called Risk ID without recording, which allows these machines to work and still detect risky behaviors, but not actually record the video.
Those sound like some very interesting solutions.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to dig into because the state-by-state patchwork makes it difficult, but it caught my eye. It's interesting to see how technology can help provide some solutions on that.
Certainly does. Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
And Victoria, you wrote this week that with all the volatility the supply chains are facing right now, it's no surprise that business leaders are prioritizing supply chain resilience. Can you tell us more?
Yes, that's right. So, a report from supply chain software company Clio found that supply chain resilience is rising in stature among business leaders, ranking right up there with cybersecurity concerns. The company's 2025 Global Supply Chain Executive Report was published this past Tuesday. And among the findings, 83% of executives surveyed said that supply chain resilience is as critical to their companies as cybersecurity is, with many saying that they are turning to technology to boost that resilience. As one example, 47% said they're considering using artificial intelligence to increase business resiliency. This is because they say they recognize AI's potential to automate processes, predict disruptions, and enhance decision making.
Well, that makes sense, but given the volatility businesses are dealing with today, did the research touch on the underlying reasons for the growing emphasis on resilience?
Yes, and you are exactly right. So the report found that rising customer expectations and geopolitical tensions are playing a large role in all of this, especially when it comes to supply chain strategy. Nearly 80% of executives said that customers expect much higher quality today, alongside faster delivery and improved customer service. So they're continually under pressure to meet those demands. We talk about that a lot here and in the pages of the magazine, of course. And three-quarters of executives said they are concerned about geopolitical issues impacting global supply chain operations over the next 2 years. Now, these are factors we've been talking about pretty frequently since mid-January, but it seems like, people are concerned it's not ending anytime soon. The respondents cited inflation, regulatory changes, and tariffs as their greatest concerns.
Well, as we said before, supply chains count on a certain amount of predictability, and that's something we don't see a whole lot of these days.
That's for sure.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Danny Ramon of Overhaul for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder that Logistics Matters is sponsored by Zebra Robotics Automation. Are you tired of overpriced, underutilized autonomous mobile robot fulfillment solutions that drain your profits? It's time to switch to Zebra Robotics Automation. Their cutting-edge Zebra Symmetry fulfillment solution is engineered to reduce your cost per unit and give you that unbeatable competitive edge. Don't settle for less. Maximize your profits with Zebra. Discover the future of fulfillment at zebra.com/fulfillment. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.